Hi everyone. In today's video, I will be going over the Unit 4A review study guide for our test. So in this first section, we have to solve these equations, and it specifically says to solve them by factoring. On the test, you will have problems like this where we give you the equation and we tell you you have to solve it in a specific way. If you don't solve it the correct way, you will lose some credit. Not all of it, but you will lose some, so keep that in mind. Obviously, do your best to solve it the correct way, but if you can't, then I would default to a different way and solve it with a different method instead. Number 1 here, x squared minus 9x equals 36. Notice the directions, you have a little hint here. You must set the equation equal to 0 first. That's kind of a given. Anytime we're trying to solve a quadratic where we have an x squared, you have to have this equal to 0 before you can actually solve it. So, let's take care of that. That's a positive 36, so I'm going to minus 36 on both sides. We have x squared minus 9x minus 36 equals 0. From here, we're going to factor. And before I tell you how we're going to factor, let's refresh your memory on the 4 types of factoring problems. There's GCF, greatest common factor, trinomial, and there's 2 types of trinomial. The first type, the easier type, is where your a is 1, that's the number in front, and the second type is a is not equal to 1. So in the a is not equal to 1 case, that's when you have to do slide and divide. The last type, and this is the one that a lot of students forget about, is difference of squares. So the first easy way to tell these apart is based on how many terms you have. In our problem here, we have 3 terms, so it's a trinomial. And then from here, we classify it based on the a value. A here is just a 1, so we have the first type. So we have A, B, C. When it's a trinomial, that's when you use the ACB chart. So we have A times C, 1 times negative 36. That's negative 36. And our B value is negative 9. And before I find the numbers, 36 is a negative here. So we're going to be subtracting to get the number on the right side. So keep that in mind. 36 has a lot of factors, so we could throw out 1 and 36. When I subtract these, I get a 35, so that's not what I'm looking for. So let's look a little harder. Let me see, we have 2 and 18, I know that's too big, 3 and 12. If I subtract these, I get a 9. Now, I want negative 9, so the sign is doable. Make sure you can get the number first. From here, we can just fix the sign. To get negative 12, that means that negative 9, that means the 12 has to carry the negative. Let's check this real quick before we continue. 3 times negative 12, that's negative 36, yes. 3 minus 12, that's negative 9, yes. So these are my factors. When you set them up, you'll have 2 sets of parentheses and x in the front of each of them. And we have x plus 3 and x minus 12 equal to 0. This is equal to 0, so I'm not going to stop here. This means I'm not done. I have to go a step further and actually solve both of these for x. So I'm going to split these up into the 2 equations. X plus 3 equals 0, and x minus 12 equals 0. These are easy to solve. X plus 3, I'm going to minus 3 on both sides. X is negative 3. And over here, we have a minus 12, so I'm going to plus 12 on both sides. And x is 12. You are welcome to go ahead and box these here if you like. I want to write them out one more time just because they're a little crowded here. So you can write them separately, or you can write them out as a comma separated list like this. Just do x equals and then write both of the answers. You don't have to put them in a specific order. Just put both of them though. And that's it. Number 2, factoring. Make sure it's equal to 0 first. Yes. Next, we have 2 terms here. 0 does not count as a term. So it's either a GCF or a difference of squares. Always look for a GCF first, by the way. That is a number 1 factoring must have, must do, is always look for a GCF first. So let's take a look here and you ask yourself, what can I divide both of these by? They're both even, so I can definitely divide them by something. So we can take out a 2, but that's not all. I can take out a higher number than 2. That number is 4. On top of that, notice they both have x's. Now I can only take out the smaller of the x's because they both have to have it. So I can only take out the 1x, not x squared. So this is my GCF. From here, we're going to pull that 4x out. A lot of students divide and get rid of it. That's not what happens. It doesn't divide and disappear. We divide, but we still keep it. It stays around. We divide, whatever comes out of that, that goes in the parentheses. So we have 8 divided by 4, that's 2. X squared divided by x. Remember, when we divide x's, we're just subtracting these exponents. 2 minus 1, that's 1. So we still have an x. And this is just like x to the first. So you can write a 1 here or just leave it. Plus 12 over 4, that is 3. And both of these are x to the first, so when you subtract them, you get 0. So there's no x here. So this was a GCF problem. This is not a difference of squares for 2 reasons. Number 1, difference means subtraction. I'm going to write that next to it. So if you don't have a difference, if you don't have subtraction, it can't be a difference of squares. On top of that, squares is perfect squares. So if you square root all the numbers, that you have to be able to get a whole number out of that. 8 and 12 are not perfect squares. So there's just another reason why it wasn't that type. All right, we're almost done. Reminder, it's equal to 0. So after that, I have to split them up and solve. 4x, that still has an x in it, so I am going to set it equal to 0 and solve. 2x plus 3, I'm going to need a little more space, so I'm going to come all the way over here. 2x plus 3 equals 0. And we solve. 4x equals 0, we'll just divide that 4 off on both sides. X is 0, so there's my first answer. Second problem, I've got 2x plus 3 equals 0. First, I'm going to minus 3 on both sides. We get 2x equals negative 3. And then I will divide by 2 on both sides. X is negative 3 over 2. You can turn that into a decimal, but there's no need. You can just leave it as a fraction. Next, number 3. Here we have 3x squared plus 17x minus 6 equals 0. It's equal to 0, so now we can look and see how we're going to factor it. We have 3 terms here, so it's one of the trinomial problems. Let's label A, B, C. A is not 1, so it's the second one we're going to slide and divide here. So let me go ahead and set up my factors. We'll put x in there, of course, we always do that. Now my trick, slide and divide, means I find these numbers and then I divide by the a value. So a lot of students forget this step. To avoid forgetting it, I do it at the very beginning. Let's go ahead and set up dividing by the a by 3 right here. If I do it at the beginning when I first notice that a is not 1, I am far less likely to forget about it. And then when I come back here later, I will see it. Very hard to ignore at that point. Now I will set up my ACB chart and solve for x. So we have A is 3, 3 times negative 6, that's negative 18, and B is positive 17. So notice, again, we have a negative here, so we're actually subtracting over here. 18 and 17, those are very close together. They're only one apart. So our factors are more than likely actually the 1 and 18 pair. If I subtract these, 18 minus 1, I do get 17, and I do want a positive 17. So that means I'm going to do 18 minus 1. Let's check that real quick. Negative 1 times 18, that's negative 18. True. And then I'll subtract, so I'm going to put the 18 first and then the minus 1 after it. 18 minus 1, that is 17, yes. So these are my factors. Let's fill those in. X minus 1 over 3 and x plus 18 over 3 equals 0. Okay, over here, this is where slide and divide gets its name. We have an option with each of these. We're either going to slide the 3 in front of the x, or we're going to divide. If we can divide, we're going to do that. 1 divided by 3, that's a decimal, so we'll push the 3 in front of the x. 3x minus 1. 18 divided by 3, that's a 6. So this is still just x, and then we bring down the plus. All right, we have this equal to 0. Let's set these up and solve. 3x minus 1 equals 0. X plus 6 equals 0. 3x minus 1 equals 0. This is a minus 1, so I'll plus 1 on both sides. 3x equals positive 1. Divide by that 3 on both sides. X is 1/3. So there's my first answer. X plus 6 equals 0. That's a plus 6. I will minus 6 on both sides. X is negative 6. And there you have it. Number 4. 5x squared minus 23x equals negative 12. Again, we have to have this equal to 0 before we can even start. So we're not even ready to start yet. This is a negative 12, a minus 12, so I'm going to plus 12 on both sides. Reminder, I can't add 12 to either of these numbers because each of them has an x term, 12 does not. They are not like terms. So it's just going to join these numbers over here. 5x squared minus 23x plus 12 equals 0. Now we have an equation. We have our trinomial over here equal to 0, 3 terms, a, b, c. Once again, notice that the a is not 1, so that means I'm going to slide and divide. Let's go ahead and set that up before we forget about it. We have our x's, and we're going to have to divide by this 5, so let's go ahead and put this in here. Equals 0. Now we'll do the ACB chart to figure out what my factors are. So we have a times c, 5 times 12, that's positive 60. And then b is negative 23. So since this is a positive 60, we're actually adding to get this 23. Don't focus on the negative, just focus on finding two numbers that add to 23. Then we can figure out the signs. Okay. 60, big number, it's got quite a few factors. So let's throw some out there. We have 1 and 60. If I add these, I get 61, not even close. 2 and 30, it's even. That's 32, nope. Let's see here. We have 3 and 20. If I add these, that is 23. That's what I want. Now I want a negative 23. So to get that, these both have to be negatives. If I add two negatives, I still get a negative. Negative 3 plus negative 20 is negative 23. Yes. Let's check it for good measure. We have negative 3 times negative 20. Now when you multiply two negatives, you get a positive. So this is positive 60, yes. And then negative 3 plus negative 20. When I add two negatives, the result is still negative. This is negative 23, yes. So I have my factors. We have x minus 3 over 5 and x minus 20 over 5. From here, 3 over 5, that is not a whole number, that's a decimal, so let's push the 5 in front. 5x minus 3. 20 over 5, that's a 4. So x minus 4, keep the sign too. Okay, this is equal to 0, so we split and solve. We have 5x minus 3 equal to 0. And we have x minus 4 equal to 0. 5x minus 3 is equal to 0. Let me cut this off real quick. This is a minus 3, so I will plus 3. Five x equals positive 3. And then we divide by the 5 on both sides. X is equal to 3/5. That's one of my answers. And x minus 4 equals 0. This is a minus 4, so I'm going to plus 4 on both sides. X is 4. And there you have it. Here are the two answers. All right. From here, 5 and 6, we're going to put away the factoring for now because now we have to use quadratic formula. They tell us to. So they give us the quadratic formula here. This will be given on the test as well. So again, you don't have to memorize it. You just have to know how to use it. So, number 5, 2x squared minus x equals negative 2. Just like all the other problems, we have to get it equal to 0 before we can start. So, this negative 2 has to come over here. That's a minus 2. I'm going to plus 2 on both sides. 2x squared minus x plus 2 equal to 0. Again, don't actually combine any terms here. We have no like terms. Now we label a, b, c, where this is a negative 1 for the b. At this point, if you haven't grabbed a calculator, I'd go ahead and do that. We're going to be using that here. Let's plug these in. X equals, first we have that negative. B is negative 1 in parentheses, plus or minus the square root of, again, b, so negative 1 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is also 2. All over 2 times a, which is 2. Next step, x equals this negative 1, that turns it into a positive 1, so it's just 1. Plus or minus the square root. This is what I'm going to use the calculator for. I'm going to type in everything under the square root. Don't type in the actual square root. That can cause some problems for you. Only type in what's underneath it. You can see my entire calculator on the screen, so I'm going to show you all the buttons. So if you need to rewind this, rewatch it, whatever you need to do to see what exactly I'm pressing, please do that. We have negative 1 squared minus 4. In parentheses, we have a 2, and in parentheses, we have another 2. I am typing exactly what is written here. Every single symbol is going to my calculator. And we end up with a negative 15. On the bottom of the fraction, we have 2 times 2, that's just 4. Next, let's take care of this square root. 15 is not a perfect square, so I can't do anything with it, and I can't break it down either. It's just not a nice square at all. But this negative cannot stay under the square root. We have 1 plus or minus. This comes out, and we write it as an I. I square root of 15 over 4. We've got these down to just a term, and I can't do anything else in here. My last step is to just separate this into 2 different fractions. So I have the 1 over 4, plus or minus goes in the middle, and then I have the I square root of 15 all over 4. I'm going to stop here. This I and the square root 15 make this complicated, so there's nothing else I can do. This is my answer. Let's do that again, number 6. 3x squared equals negative 17x minus 10. Once again, we have to have this equal to 0 before we can solve. So, you can do this in one step, but for some of you who still struggle a bit with your equations, I wouldn't recommend that. I'm going to do this one step at a time. First, I'm going to move the negative 17, so plus 17x. Once again, do not add these. We're just going to write them together. 3x squared plus 17x equals negative 10. And one more time. That's a negative 10, so I'm going to plus the 10 over here. Again, don't actually add anything. 3x squared plus 17x plus 10 equal to 0. Now I am able to solve with the quadratic formula. Label ABC. And let's plug this in. X equals, first we have that negative, b, which is 17, still in parentheses, plus or minus the square root of b, so 17 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 3, times c, which is 10. All over 2a. So 2 times 3. Let's take a couple steps to break this down. Negative 17, we can just drop those parentheses, so now it's just a negative 17. Plus or minus the square root. And let's use our calculator to figure out what this number is. We have 17 squared minus 4 times 3 times 10. Once again, we're not typing in the actual square root, so don't do that. We get 169 over 6. 2 times 3 is 6. Next step, we have negative 17 plus or minus 169. That is a perfect square if you didn't recognize it. Make sure you always check and see if this is a perfect square. It never hurts. We get a 13 all over 6. Next, trying to figure out where I'm going to write all this. You can just do it over here. I'm going to come down one more time. Now that we just have a term on each spot, we can separate this into 2 fractions. We have negative 17 over 6 plus or minus 13 over 6. Now we'll split it into our two math problems. We have negative 17 over 6 plus, the top one, 13 over 6. And I'm going to grab a Post-it note just so I'm not getting as close to the edge of the paper. Negative 17 over 6 minus 13 over 6. So let's solve both of these. Remember with fractions, the denominator carries through, so don't change it. Negative 17 plus 13, that's negative 4. And this is a reducible fraction, so if you notice that, please reduce it. We can divide top and bottom by 2, so this is negative 2/3. That's my first answer. And I'll need one more Post-it note to get through all of this. So we're going to carry through that denominator. Negative 17 minus 13, that's negative 30. And then when I divide negative 30 by 6, this is a nice number. This is just negative 5. So negative 5 is my other answer. And there you have it. Those are our two answers. Next page. Solve by completing the square. Probably been a minute since you've done this, so you're probably struggling a bit with these kind of problems. You only have to do this a time or two on the test, so if this is something you struggle with, don't freak out too much, but again, it is still important that you understand it long enough to get a couple problems done for the test. So your hint is right here. Get x squared and x alone first. So, number 7 here, we have x squared minus 10x plus 36 equals 0. Unlike the other problems, you only want the x squared and the x, the regular constant, no x, has no x on it, needs to move over to the other side. So equal to 0 is actually not helpful here. So we're going to move it back to the right side. This is a plus, so I'm going to minus 36 on both sides. We get x squared minus 10x is equal to negative 36. This is what the setup should look like before you go in to complete the square. So this is now ready to have the square completed on both sides. So we have x squared minus 10x plus something equals negative 36 plus something. The something that goes in that blank is the completing the square step. So how we get that, we use a little formula. It's b over 2 squared. And let's go down here. We have a, b, and then this is going to be c. That's what we're looking for. A here is just a 1. So let's fill that in. B is negative 10. Don't leave that negative behind. If b is negative, it comes along with it. Equals, keep it squared. That's the trick to doing this properly and more easily, is don't actually square this yet. Negative 10 divided by 2, that becomes a negative 5. So this is what's going in the blanks. So I have negative 5 squared, negative 5 squared. Now, if you remember when we did notes over this, we talked about how this factors and the trick to doing this. So you can turn this into a 25 and factor it by hand, but that is more work than you have to do if you know the trick. So the trick is we're going to write just one pair of parentheses with the squared on the outside. And then in the front, we write an x. And then the number that goes in here is what's inside of the parentheses. So I'm going to bring down just the negative 5. Don't put any squareds in here. I've seen a lot of students do that. So bring down just the minus 5. So this is x minus 5 squared. Equals negative 36. Now I will turn this into, I'm going to put this in the calculator. Remember, this becomes positive 25. You have to put the parentheses around it in the calculator for it to show up correctly. I'll show once again, if you drop the parentheses, it gives you a negative 25, and this is incorrect. So make sure you put those parentheses. This is plus 25. All right. From here, I'm going to do the subtraction on the right side. Negative 36 plus 25. Yeah, that's negative 11. That's what I thought. Negative 11. And then bring this down. X minus 5 squared. From here, I just have to get the x by itself now. This is done in a few steps. First off, we have a square. We need to get rid of it. The opposite of squaring is square rooting. Square root both sides. And if you remember, when you introduce the square root on the right side, we also bring in another symbol. It's called the plus or minus. That goes in front of the square root. Now it's part of our answer. So we have x minus 5. Because when we did the square root canceled out the square. So now it's just gone. Equals, bring this down, plus or minus. And I'm going to bring down the square root, but we have a negative underneath it. That negative, reminder, cannot be under the square root. It has to come out, and we write it as an I. Now I'll bring down the square root of 11. One more step. To get the x by itself, I need to move that minus 5, so I'm going to plus 5 on both sides. X equals, don't combine, there's definitely not like terms here. Bottom to top, write the bottom number first, so 5. You don't have to put the plus in front of it. Plus or minus goes in the middle, and then the I square root of 11 goes after it. This is our answer. Let's do that again. Number 8, x squared plus 12x minus 15 equals 0. Once again, we want only x's over here, so this plain number needs to move to the right side. That's a minus 15. I will plus 15 on both sides. X squared plus 12x equals positive 15. This is now ready for the completing the square step. So I'll have x squared plus 12x plus something equals 15 plus something. Add it to both sides. Again, this mystery number comes from b over 2 squared. So we have b is 12. So this is 12 over 2 squared. And then we just divide. 12 divided by 2, that's 6. And this was a positive 12, so that's why there was no negative this time. So I'm going to put 6 squared in the blanks. Now I'm going to factor this down. So reminder, the trick is you just write one set of parentheses squared. We put an x in the front. And then we bring down the number in parentheses. This is a positive 6, so this is plus 6. Again, don't write any squareds inside the parentheses, just the one on the outside. Equals, we have 15, plus, I can go ahead and turn this into 6 squared, 6 times 6, that's 36. From here, we just need to solve. So 15 and 36, that is 51. I'm going to check just to be sure. Yes. Bring this down. X plus 6 squared. Now I can square root both sides. Don't forget that plus or minus in front of the square root 51. So the square root and the square cancel. We have x plus 6 equals plus or minus the square root of 51. 51 is a prime number, so we cannot break this down. So we're just going to leave it like that. Lastly, we have a plus 6. Let's minus 6 on both sides. X equals, bottom to top, negative 6 plus or minus square root of 51. That is our answer. And there you have it. That's all we have to do for completing the square. If you really like that method and want to use it in other places, reminder, you can only use it if you have an a value of 1, if there's no number in front of this x squared. So that's why both of those problems looked like that. If there was a number in front of either of these, then we'd have to do something else. 9 through 12. Solve each quadratic by any method. So let's talk about this. We have 3 methods. We just did all of them. We have factoring. That's what we did first. We have quadratic formula. And we have completing the square. I'll just write CTS for short. So let's talk about these 3 methods in comparison to one another. Factoring works most of the time. Most of the time I'd say is a fair assessment, but there are many times factoring does not work. Some problems just cannot be factored. It just depends. Completing the square, as I just mentioned, only works if a is 1. So if a is not 1, you can't use it. So there are some problems where if you can't factor it and you can't complete the square, you must use quadratic formula. Quadratic formula is the only method of the 3 that works every single time, no matter what kind of problem you have. So it's extremely reliable. It can just take a bit of time to use, so it really just depends. If you're good at all 3 methods, you basically go with the one that's the fastest for that problem. So it's really up to you. For me on this study guide, I am going to factor, and if I can't factor, then I'll use quadratic formula. Factoring, again, is fastest if you can factor, if you're able to factor the problem. And I really think that you guys need to see more factoring problems just to practice with it more. If you want to do these on your own and do a different method, I know a lot of you like quadratic formula, that's up to you. Just make sure you get the same answers that I do. Number 9. X squared minus 10x plus 13 equals 6x minus 35. First off, we can't start yet. We have to get this equal to 0. So that's 6x. That's positive. I'm going to minus 6x on both sides. This time, I do have a like term I can combine it with. This negative 10x here, they both have an x. So I'll put this underneath. So we have x squared. I'm going to do the subtraction. Negative 10 minus 6, that's negative 16x. Bring down the plus 13. Equals negative 35. Again, negative 35, I have to move that over. I'm going to plus 35 on both sides. Now this time, I'm going to put it with its like term, the constant 13, that also does not have an x. So we have x squared minus 16x plus, this is 48. And then this is now a 0. From here, I can look at my 3 options. As I told you, I'm going to start with factoring, and then if that doesn't work, I'll go to quadratic formula. You can complete the square because a is 1. So if you really like that, you can do it on this problem. But I'm going to factor. Factoring. This is a trinomial. We have 3 terms, and our a is 1, so we just need that ACB chart to get through this problem. So a is 1. Let me go ahead and label this real quick. A is 1. We have 1 times 48. Well, that's 48. And our b is negative 16. This is a positive 48. So we're going to be adding on the right side. Well, whatever two numbers we find over here, they have to add to 16. Again, the negative part can be figured out in a moment, but let's work on getting the right number first. 48, kind of a big number, not really. It's got quite a few factors, but the list isn't too extensive. So let's start easy. We've got 1 and 48. If I add these, I get 49. That's not what I want. Let's see, we have 2 and 24. That's going to be too big. I know we can divide it by 3. Let's try that. 48 divided by 3. That is 16, so that's not going to, yeah. If I do 3 and 16 and I add, I'm going to get 19, so I don't want that. So let's keep going. 4 and 12. If I add 4 and 12, I do get 16. Now this has to be a negative 16. So to make that happen, I just have to make both of these negative. Let's check. Negative 4 times negative 12 equals positive 48. Yes, negative times negative is still positive. Negative 4 plus negative 12, that is negative 16. Yes, these match the numbers I have up here. Please take the extra moment to do this on your test. You will not believe how many students are confident that they have the right numbers, and they don't. And I know if they had checked, they would have absolutely realized their mistake. These are my factors. Set up my x's. We have x minus 4 and x minus 12. All right, we have our factors equal to 0. Let's split them up. X minus 4 equals 0. X minus 12 equal to 0. This is a minus 4, so I will plus 4 on both sides. X is 4. This is a minus 12, so I'll plus 12 on both sides. And x is equal to 12. X is 4 and x is 12. Those are my answers. And we're done with number 9. Number 10. 8x squared minus 2x minus 3 is equal to 0. So, this is already equal to 0. That's good. I don't have to worry about moving things around. Now let's look at our options. We can't use completing the square on this one because a is not 1. A is 8. So if this is the method you like, sorry, you have to do something else. So let's, again, like I said, I'll do factoring first, and if that doesn't work, then I'll do quadratic formula. So I'm going to try factoring first. Again, let's take a look here. This has 3 terms, so this is a trinomial, and my a term is not 1, so I'm going to slide and divide. So we have a, b, c. And again, take notice, a is not 1, so let's go ahead and take care of that first before we forget. Set up our x's, and more importantly, let's go ahead and divide by that 8. It's very hard to forget later when I've already noticed that it's there if I write it down now. Now let's go find our numbers. A, C, B. A is 8, C is negative 3. Remember, this is a times c. 8 times negative 3, that's negative 24. And b is negative 2. And this is a negative 24, so that means we're going to be subtracting over here. So whatever two numbers I get in the left column have to subtract to give me a 2. Again, don't worry about the sign just yet. Just try to get 2, and then we'll focus on how to get negative 2. 24 has a few factors. We have 1 and 24. If I subtract these, I'm going to get 23. So that's not it. Let's look for something else. 2 and 12, that's going to be 10. 3 and 8 is going to be 5. 4 and 6. If I subtract 4 and 6, I get 2. Now I want a negative 2. So if I do 6 minus 4, that's positive 2. So let's do 4 minus 6. Let's give the negative to the 6. Let's check it. 4 times negative 6, that's negative 24 when I'm multiplying, and that matches, yes. And then 4 minus 6, that's negative 2, that matches. Those are my factors. So I have x plus 4 and x minus 6. From here, we either slide or divide. Now we have a unique situation going on right here. 4 and 8, we can't divide because that's a fraction, or sorry, that's a decimal, but we can reduce. If you can reduce, do it, please. So 4 over 8, if I can divide both of these by 4, that becomes 1/2. So x plus 1/2. And we have the same thing going on over here. Here we have negative 6/8, which again, we can simplify down to, we can divide them both by 2. So this can become 3 over 2. Or sorry, 3 over 4? Divide them by 2? Yeah, 3 over 4. So then we have x minus 3/4. Now that we've reduced these, we will go ahead and we'll do the slide part. So we'll push the 2 in front of the x and the 4 in front of the x. So we get 2x plus 1 and 4x minus 3 equal to 0. All right, now we'll split this up. We have 2x plus 1 equal to 0 and 4x minus 3 equal to 0. Let's solve. 2x plus 1, so I'm going to minus 1. That will give me 2x equals negative 1. Divide by 2. X equals, I'm doing it over here because I'm going to make a list, negative 1/2. And then let's do it again over here. We have 4x minus 3 equal to 0. Minus 3, so I'm going to plus 3 on both sides. 4x equals positive 3, divide by 4. X is 3/4. And there you have it. Number 11, x squared equals 2x minus 2. First off, this is not ready to be solved yet. We have to get both of these to the left side first. I'll do this in 2 steps. We have a 2x here, so I'm going to minus, because it's positive, we're going to minus 2x on both sides. X squared minus 2x equals negative 2. And let's do that again. That's a minus 2, so we'll plus 2 on both sides. Again, we're not combining any terms here because none of them are like terms. X squared minus 2x plus 2 is equal to 0. Okay, let's take a look at our options. So you can complete the square. A is 1, so you're going to go on that. I'm going to try factoring. Once again, we have 3 terms here. 0 does not count as a term. And a is 1, so we don't have to slide and divide. We have our x's. I'm running out of room over here, so my apologies for moving this to the right a little bit. ACB chart. A, again, is just a 1. So we have 1 times 2, A times C, that is 2. And then B is negative 2. AC is a positive 2, so we're going to be adding 2 numbers over here. Now 2 is easy. 2 only has one pair of factors, 1 and itself. If I add 1 and 2, I get a 3. So I can't get a 2. Problem. I don't have any other factors. This is not a factorable problem. That doesn't mean I'm done. That just means I can't factor. So since I can't factor, I would either have to do complete the square or quadratic formula. So I'm going to go with quadratic formula. I'll take a moment and write out the formula so that it's next to me as I go. X equals negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Put this over here. Okay. So let's plug this in and solve. X equals, first we have the negative, b is negative 2 in parentheses, plus or minus the square root of b, which again is negative 2, squared, minus 4 times a, which is just 1, times c, which is positive 2, all over 2a, which is 2 times 1. X equals negative negative 2, that just turns into a positive 2, plus or minus the square root under the square root, we'll type that into the calculator. Negative 2 squared, make sure you use parentheses, minus 4 times 1 times 2. That gave us a negative 4. And then on the bottom, 2 times 1, that's just 2. Couple things here. Let's first take care of this negative under the square root. Remember, that is absolutely not allowed. So we have 2 plus or minus. This becomes I square root 4 over 2. Let's keep going. 2 plus or minus I square root of 4. You should know that's 2. So I'm going to put that 2 in parentheses over 2. 2 plus or minus, let's reverse this order. Number, then letter. So 2 square root I over 2. We're almost done. Now we can separate this into 2 fractions. 2 over 2, plus or minus in the middle, 2i over 2. Lastly, these will divide very nicely. 2 divided by 2 is 1. Plus or minus, again, 2 divided by 2 is 1, and bring down the I. This is our final answer. And again, we can't go any further because of the I. And this explains why we couldn't factor it. Clearly, it was not going to work out nicely. Number 12, 25x squared minus 4 equals 0. It's ready to be solved. Let's look at our options. You cannot complete the square. A is not 1. Because here, we just have A and C. Take note of that. And then I can either try factoring or quadratic formula, so let's try factoring. Let's look at our options here. We have 2 terms, so I'm not going to use the middle 2 options, trinomial, because I don't have that. So this is either a GCF or a difference of squares. Always check for the GCF first. So I'm going to ask myself, can I divide either of these by something? I can't divide them by x because this has an x, or x is, but this one does not. 4 and 25. I can only divide 4 by 2 and 4. I can't divide 25 by 2 or 4. So there is no GCF. Let's check for difference of squares. First off, difference, you want subtraction. We do have that. And squares as in perfect squares. So I ask, if I square root both of these, do I get nice numbers? And that answer is yes. We have a difference of squares here. What we do, we square root the front and the back. Don't include the negative because we don't want any i's in this problem. So let's square root both of these. Square root of 25x squared, that's all together. Square root of 25 is 5. Square root of x squared is just x. Now we square root the 4. That's 2. Let's build our answer. We're still going to have 2 sets of parentheses. Don't forget the equals 0. 5x goes in the front, just like how the 25x squared is in the front. The 2 goes in the back, just like how the square root 4 is. And then we need one of each sign. We need a plus and a minus. So we have this equal to 0. Now we just got to split these up and solve. 5x plus 2 is equal to 0. And 5x minus 2 is equal to 0. Five x plus 2 equals 0. I'm going to minus 2 on both sides. 5x equals negative 2. Divide by 5 on both sides. X is negative 2/5. Again, we have 5x minus 2, so I'm going to plus 2 on both sides. Five x equals positive 2. Divide by 5. X is positive 2/5. So we have a positive 2/5 and a negative 2/5. Next page. So that first half of the test, that obviously took quite a while. There's a lot of work involved. The back half, the second page, this doesn't take quite as much time to do. So we're really over halfway done, to be honest. All right, let's talk about the discriminant. This entire page covers the discriminant. So first we're going to fill out this little table. This is just talking about the 3 different categories for the discriminant. So the discriminant, first off, if you remember, is b squared minus 4ac. Let me grab the quadratic formula here. It's the part under the square root. That's what this is. It's the part under the square root. That's where it's coming from. So we just take that piece of the equation and we focus on it for a bit. So our 3 categories. If it's bigger than 0, that means it's positive. If it's equal to 0, so 0, or less than 0, negative. So we talked about these in class. Based on what type of number you get, that's going to tell you how many solutions and the type of solutions. So positive and negative, they both give you 2 solutions. 0 will give you 1 solution. Positive and 0 will both give you real solutions. Negative, that's when your eyes will come into play later. We get 2 solutions still, but they're not real. These are imaginary. You'll also see the word complex thrown out there. Solutions. On the test, you're welcome to write either of these. I know most of you are going to write imaginary because I only mentioned complex in passing. We didn't really talk about what that means. And that's because we don't really get into it in this class, so I'm not going to spend much time on this. And notice in the directions on the next problem, it even says your options here, so you don't have to remember them off the top of your head, but just know what the difference is. Okay. So number 13, we're going to find the discriminant of each of these problems, and then we're going to do this classification based on the chart we just filled out. So, first one, we have our equation, x squared minus 5x plus 12 equals 0. Let's first label A, B, C. A is 1. And we're plugging them into the discriminant, which is b squared minus 4ac. So, let's plug those numbers in. B is negative 5, so we have negative 5 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, and c, which is 12. And let's just use the calculator. Negative 5 squared minus 4 times 1 times 12. And we get negative 23. So we got a negative number. So we're in this part of the table. Negative number of solutions. You still get 2 solutions, but that's when you have the imaginary or complex. So you can write either of them. Imaginary, or you can write complex. You can write one or the other or both. It's up to you. All right, next one. 4x squared plus 20x plus 25 equals 0. A, B, C. We have B, so 20 squared minus 4 times A, which is 4, times C, which is 25. And let's use the calculator. 20 squared minus 4 times 4 times 25. And that gave us 0. So 0, that was the middle category, and I meant to put one real solution, not solutions. 0, that gives us one solution, but it's real. So only one solution, but it's a real solution. One more problem. X squared minus 18x plus 64 equals 0. A, B, C. A is 1. We have B, so negative 18 squared minus 4 times A, which is 1, times C, which is 64. Calculator. Negative 18 squared minus 4 times 1 times 64. And we got 68. So this is positive. Positive has 2 solutions and they're real. For the test, you will have to know these patterns here. You will have to be able to classify these on your own. So let's go over this one more time. Positive and negative. They both have 2 solutions, but positives are real, negatives are not. 0 only has 1 solution, but it's a real solution just like the positive ones. All right, number 14. This question gets a lot of students in this unit. It's a question that's really easy to overthink, but when I show you how to do it, it's really not that bad. Let me just read it. In the equation, 2x squared minus 9x minus k equals 0, k is a constant. If the equation has no real solutions, which of the following could be the value of k? Must show work to receive credit. So, and we say that because it's multiple choice. So first off, we're working with the discriminant, and I know that because it's telling me this equation has no real solutions. And we can figure that out by the discriminant. So no real solutions. If it doesn't have real solutions, that means it has imaginary solutions. So let's go back up to our table. If it has imaginary solutions, that means we want a negative discriminant. So the right equation will have a discriminant equals a negative number. So this is what we want when we're finding the discriminants. The correct answer will have a negative discriminant. So let's try our options here. Option A is 0. So what we're doing is we're going to one at a time plug these into K up here and find the discriminant, and then we're going to see which one is the one we want. We have 2x squared minus 9x minus k, which is 0, minus 0. And you don't have to worry about writing down the equals 0 if you don't want to. We have A, B, and C. B squared minus 4AC, that's how we find the discriminant. So we have B, which is negative 9 squared, minus 4 times A, which is 2, times C, which is 0. And then I'm going to use my calculator to get that. Negative 9 squared minus 4 times 2 times 0. That gave me 81. I want a negative number, so that is not it. B, 8. So we have 2x squared minus 9x minus 8. So we have A, B, C. And I'm just going to do that again. B squared minus 4AC. B is negative 9 minus 4 times A, which is 2, times C, which is negative 8. And I can actually fit this on here this time. And you'll notice when I keep doing this, the only number is going to change is the C number, because that's the only thing I'm changing as I go. Again, we're plugging these in for K. We're trying to find the K value that gives us a negative number here. So actually, if you have one of these calculators, or if you use one of my classroom calculators, they do this as well, you can actually go up into what you typed out, and you can change it. This saves you some time on tests and quizzes, by the way. So I'm going to replace the 0 with a negative 8, and it's now how it's supposed to be. That gave me 145. Not a negative number, though. So it's not B. Let's try C. 2x squared minus 9x minus K is, we're trying negative 20. So I'm going to write minus negative 20. Before I label ABC, let's write this again. 2x squared minus 9x. This turns into a plus 20. So my C is actually positive here. I need to be careful about that. ABC. Now we have B squared minus 4AC. b is negative 9 squared. Oh, and I just realized I didn't even write squared when I did it above. Whoops. Negative 9 squared minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is 20. So let's give that one a shot. Again, it's the same. Negative 9 squared minus 4 times 2 times, we just got to change this to 20. And now it matches. And that gave me negative 79. And that gave me a negative number. This is what I wanted. So C, negative 20, is the correct answer. All right, let's do that again. Number 15. In the equation, 4x squared plus 12x equals k, k is a constant. If the equation has two real solutions, which of the following could be the value of k? So first, let's figure out what we're looking for. Two real solutions. Let's go back up to our chart. Two real solutions is a positive number. So now we're looking for the opposite of the last problem. We want our discriminant to equal a positive number. So we're looking for this. Now before I get started, this is not equal to 0, so I have to do something else before I can start. 4x squared plus 12x equals k. Just like any other problem, I need this equal to 0 first. So we're going to minus k. 4x squared plus 12x minus k equals 0. So this is what I'm going to be plugging into when I am solving. All right, let's get started. A, we have 4x squared plus 12x minus k is negative 9. And let me rewrite this again. 4x squared plus 12x minus a negative is a positive 9. Now I'll label ABC. And again, we're testing this with the discriminant. B squared minus 4AC. B is 12 squared minus 4 times A, which is also 4, times C, which is 9. Let's use the calculator here. We have 12 squared minus 4 times 4 times 9. And we got 0. That's not what we wanted. 0 is not a positive number. 0 is 0. It's its own category. So A is not the answer. Let's try B. We have 4x squared plus 12x minus, and my k is negative 8. So once again, that's going to turn into a positive. 4x squared plus 12x plus 8. Now we will label ABC. B squared minus 4AC. We have 12 squared minus 4 times A, which is also 4, times C, which is 8. Again, since this is going to match, I'm just going to go through and edit what needs to be edited. So this is now an 8. Oh, let me delete that. Okay. and I got positive 16. And I did want a positive number here. So this is what I wanted. Our answer is B, negative 8. Wonderful. That was page 3. Discriminant problems, back page. Word problems. So, when we solve the word problems, we got to set them up, and then we solve the equation. Again, depending on the problem, we have different options for that. Number 16. Jeremy's bedroom is 144 square feet. The width of his bedroom is X feet, and the length is 7 feet less than the width. Find the length and the width of Jeremy's bedroom. So if you didn't gather that from the problem, this is a rectangle we're talking about. When it says length and width, it's going to either be a rectangle or a square. Most of the time it's a rectangle. Even if you're not sure, draw a rectangle. You can always change that. So we have a rectangle. Length is on the bottom, width is on the side. Now it's 144 square feet. The square tells you its area. So A equals 144. And then this information is really important. The width of his bedroom is X feet. The width is X feet. So that means the W is just equal to X. And the length is 7 feet less than the width. 7 feet less than the width. So I'm going to take the width, which is X, and I want 7 less than that, so you're going to subtract 7. So the length is X minus 7. So you take the width minus 7, so X minus 7, you'll get the length. So technically the length is actually going to be shorter, so I could redraw it to reflect that. So really, I'm not going to do a whole big picture, but really his bedroom looks a little more like this, since the width is actually longer. But that's okay. Lastly, to fully solve the problem, you need to know the formula for area of a rectangle. A equals length times width. Let's set this up and solve. A is 144 equals the length is X minus 7 times the width is X. So, first off, we need to multiply these together. We're going to distribute this X inside of here. Just an FYI, distribution works in either the front or the back. So we can have this or we can have this. As long as they're butted up against each other, you will distribute. 9 times out of 10, it's going to look like the top one, but every now and then we'll have that. And by the way, you're always welcome to rewrite it this way if that helps you. We have 144 equals X times X, that's X squared. Negative 7 times X, that's minus 7X. And then we need everything on one side. We need an equal to 0. So I'm going to move the 144 over here. I'm going to minus 144 on both sides. We have 0 equals X squared minus 7X minus 144. Now, I'm not going to turn this problem around, but I know a lot of you, it's really hard to do an equation when the x's are on the wrong side. So you are more than welcome to flip this. Put this on the left side, x squared minus 7x minus 144, and then equals 0 on the right side. You are always allowed to flip an equation, just don't change anything. I didn't change any numbers or signs, I just did a complete flip-flop, and it worked. So that's an option as well. Okay, let's solve. We have options, the same options as before. You can factor, you can use quadratic formula, and you can even complete the square because A is 1 here. So the option, of course, is yours. I'm still going to factor because it's just less writing. It takes up less space. I always prefer factoring personally. And it's good practice because factoring is an easy skill to forget how to use. So, I'm going to factor this. I'm going to set up my factors. I've got my x, my other x, ACB chart. Let me label ABC. A is 1. So AC, that's A times C. 1 times negative 44, or negative 144, excuse me. That's negative 144. And B is negative 7. Since this is a negative 144 over here, we're going to be subtracting to get this 7. Okay. 144. A big number probably has a lot of factors. So this is going to take a minute, but we'll get there. Let's start with 1 and 144. That's the obvious pairing. Now if I subtract these, I'm going to get 143. That's too big. It's even, so I can divide by 2, of course. Now, if I do 2 and 72, that's still too big. I'm not going to get 7 when I subtract. And 3, let's see if 3 goes into that. 3 and 48, that's still too big. If I subtract, that's 45. 4, I think, goes into it. 36. If I subtract, that's going to be 32, so that's still too big. I can say for sure that you can't divide it by 5. What about 6? 6 and 24, that's still too big. If I subtract those, I get 18. Let me see if I can divide by 7. No. 8. 8 and 18. That's 10 if I subtract. That's really close, but not what I'm looking for. What about 9? 9 and 16. If I do 16 minus 9, that is 7. Now I want negative 7. So it's not 16 minus 9, it's 9 minus 16. So we have 9 times negative 16. That is negative 144. Check. And 9 minus 16, that is negative 7. So that works. We have x, these are my factors, plus 9 and x minus 16. Okay, we found our two factors. Let's set them both equal to 0 and solve. X plus 9 equal to 0. X minus 16 equal to 0. This is a plus 9. I will minus 9 on both sides. X is equal to negative 9. Again, x minus 16, I will plus 16 on both sides. X is equal to positive 16. Reminder, we are doing a story problem, a word problem, the real world. So, I cannot have a negative when I'm measuring someone's bedroom. That's not possible. So, this is not the answer. Instead, my answer is the 16. So x is 16. Now I'm not done. A lot of students will get down to here and then they'll stop. Make sure you're answering the question. Find the length and the width of Jeremy's bedroom. So we're finding L and W. So the width is just x. That's what I just found. X is 16. So W is 16, and I did not leave myself space to write the label. Feet. And the length. The length is x minus 7. X is 16. 16 minus 7, which is 9. So the length is 9 feet. I do want to clarify that 9 did not come from this negative 9 down here, and we just take off the label. It's a coincidence that this also happened to be a 9 as well. So don't take that that's always going to work, because it's not. So just be careful about that. All right, we're done with number 16. Number 17. The length of a rectangle is 1 less than twice the width. The area of the rectangle is 45 square centimeters. Find the length and the width of the rectangle. We're going to be doing that again. We have a rectangle. Area A is 45. The length, we have the length here. The length is 1 less than twice the width. So 1 less than twice the width. What this means is if I take 2 times the width, so 2w, and I take away 1 from it, 1 less than, minus 1, I will get the length. Width is just going to be width. There's nothing else special about it. It's just w. Okay, I'm going to set up the problem the exact same way I did it before. This time, I'll flip the formula around so that the x's will be on the correct side for you guys. So we have length times width is equal to area. So the length is 2w minus 1 times w is equal to a, which is 45. From here, I need to first multiply these together. So again, I'm just going to distribute the w inside of there. 2w times w, that is 2w squared. And then negative 1 times w, that's a minus w, equals 45. And I have to move that 45 over. That's positive 45, so minus 45 on both sides. 2w squared minus w minus 45 is equal to 0. Now I may solve. Once again, you have options. You cannot complete the square because of the 2. A is not 1. So you can't complete the square, but you can do either of these. Factor or quadratic formula. I'm going to factor, you know that. We have a trinomial here. A is not 1. Let's get started. ACB chart, before I even do all that, sorry, backtrack. A, B, C. A is not 1. So let's go ahead and take care of that. Set up my x's, sorry, my w's. And we have to divide by 2. Let's go ahead and set that up too. Divide by 2, divide by 2. Now let's find the numbers. We have ACB. A is 2. 2 times negative 45 is negative 90. B is negative 1. It's a negative 1 there. Since this is negative 90, we're going to actually subtract over here. So we need to subtract 2 numbers to get 1. 90, kind of a big number. It's got quite a few factors. So if I do 1 and 90, that's going to give me, if I subtract, it's going to give me 89. That's not what I want. 2 and 45, that's going to give me 43. Way too big. So basically, I need 2 numbers that are 1 apart. I'm going to go ahead and just give you these numbers to speed this up. The correct numbers, and if you want to pause this and try and get them on your own, do it now. The correct numbers are 9 and 10. If I subtract, I will get a 1. Now to get negative 1, it's not 10 minus 9, it's 9 minus 10. Let's check. We have 9 times negative 10, that's negative 90, yes. And 9 minus 10, that's negative 1, yes, it matches. My factors, 9 and negative 10. We have w plus 9 over 2 and w minus 10 over 2. From here, we're going to either slide or divide. 9 over 2, that's a decimal, so we'll push the 2 in front of W. 2W plus 9. And then W minus 10 over 2. 10 over 2 is just 5, so W minus 5. Split and solve. 2W plus 9 is equal to 0. W minus 5 is equal to 0. Plus 9, I will minus 9 on both sides. 2W equals negative 9. Divide by 2. W is negative 9 over 2. Over here, W minus 5 equals 0. We will plus 5 on both sides. W is 5. Reminder, this is the length of a rectangle in centimeters. We're measuring. We can't measure negative 9 over 2 centimeters. This is not our answer. So we have W is 5. And they want the length and the width. I found the width. Let's find the length. Remember, L equals 2W minus 1. Which is 2 times 5 minus 1. I'm running out of space, so I'm just going to do this. 2 times 5 is 10, minus 1 is 9. And that's in centimeters. Again, you don't have to include the label on the test, but it's always good practice to try and remember to include it. And there you have it. We are almost done, I promise. 18. Audrey throws a basketball from a height of 3 feet with an upward velocity of 8 feet per second. That's basically just explaining the equation. The function h of t equals negative 16t squared plus 8t plus 3 gives the height h of the basketball after t seconds. After how many seconds will the ball hit the ground? Basically, the question, so first off, let me back up here. We have two letters, h and t. H is height, and t is time. The question is, after how many seconds will the ball hit the ground? How do we know when the ball is on, how do we know? If the ball is on the ground, it's not above the ground, it has no height. So h is 0. So what that means is I'm going to take this equation, and where I have h, I'm going to put a 0. H of t equals negative 16t squared plus 8t plus 3. This is all just replaced with a 0. Equals negative 16t squared plus 8t plus 3. And we have our equation set up. We have our three terms and then an equals 0 on the other side. Once again, there are options. No completing the squared. A is not 1. I'm pretty sure you can factor this, or we can use quadratic formula. On these problems, I actually prefer to use quadratic formula because some of these tend to get ugly. So I'm going to go ahead and do quadratic formula. That way you've seen another one of that as well. So, A, B, C. Got the quadratic formula right here. We have x equals negative, b is positive 8, plus or minus the square root of b, which is 8, squared minus 4 times a, which is negative 16, times c, which is 3. Just put this down here. all over 2 times a, which is negative 16. Let's simplify. And actually, I'm supposed to be solving for t, so these should be t's. Not a big deal, by the way, but I'm just very picky with myself. Okay, negative 8, so just negative 8, plus or minus the square root. Calculator for that part. Eight squared minus 4 times negative 16 times 3. And this gives us 256. And then on the bottom, 2 times negative 16, that's negative 32. And we're just going to do like an extended thing here till we get the right answer. Negative 8 plus or minus 256, let's see what that is. Square root of 256 is 16 over negative 32. Now I can split this up into two fractions. I've only got one thing in each spot. We have negative 8 plus, or sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me wipe this out. Give me just a sec. All right, we're back. So I got ahead of myself. I said one thing and then did another. Let's separate this into two fractions first. Negative 8 over negative 32 plus or minus 16 over 32. Again, don't reduce this yet, because if you end up with different denominators, and in this case you would, that's going to make your job and your life harder. So don't do anything yet. Let's split this up into the two problems. Then we can reduce at the end if we want to, or if we have to. All right, now it's time for this step. We have negative 8 over negative 32 plus 16 over 32, and negative 8 over negative 32. Oh, this should be a negative 32. I was like, where did that come from? The denominators are different. Okay, got it. Sorry. Minus 16 over negative 32. Reminder, the denominator carries through, so it's still negative 32, and we do the math on top. Negative 8 plus 16, that's positive 8. Use a calculator if you need to. And then let's divide. Now this is a word problem. So normally if you don't have a word problem, you would just reduce this and you'd be done. But again, we have to give an actual answer. We're talking about seconds, and I think someone would be pretty mad if you told them the number of seconds as a fraction. So let's get a decimal. And by the way, decimals are always options on problems, but sometimes a fraction's better if the decimal's ugly. So let's divide, and we get negative 0.25 seconds. Well, unfortunately, we can't time travel. We can't lose time here. We can't have negative seconds. So this is not it. Let's do this one. Negative 8 minus 16. That's negative 24 over negative 32. Just carry the denominator through. And let's divide. Negative 24 divided by negative 32. We get positive 0.75, and this is seconds. This we can have. This is just under a minute. Or not even under a minute. This is less than a second. Sorry. So that is our answer. And that's the only answer. And that's all the work we have to do. We don't have to do anything else with that. Final two problems. I promise these will be quick. Simplify the following squared binomial expressions. FOIL or double distribute. I teach double distribute because it works for harder problems as well. Okay. X plus 3 squared. I have a lot of Algebra 2 students who miss problems like this. I'm going to do a simpler example to show you the concept here. If we have 4 squared, we understand that is 4 times 4, which is 16. Or if I had 10 squared, then that's 10 times 10. It's just multiplying by itself, right? Well, this works for this too. If you have x's and stuff involved, it's still the same concept. This is x plus 3 times x plus 3. You write it twice. And then we're going to multiply these. And how we multiply, we double distribute. I'm going to do distribution twice. First, I'm going to distribute x into here. So I'm going to multiply everything in here by the x. X times x, that's x squared. X times 3, that's 3x. And now I'm going to go back through and I'm going to distribute with the 3. Same thing, distribute into here. 3 times x, that's 3x. 3 times 3, that's 9. If you do this in the correct order, the middle two terms can be combined. We end up with x squared plus, this is 6x. 3 plus 3, 6. Bring down the plus 9. And now we're done. Let's do that again over here. Now before I write this out twice, I know a lot of you don't like fractions, and I'm going to avoid a bunch of headache by changing this to a decimal, because 3 divided by 4 is a very nice decimal. It's just 0.75, so I'm going to use that. Let's rewrite this as 2x minus 0.75 squared. Now let's write this twice. 2x minus 0.75 times 2x minus 0.75. And let's double distribute. So first we distribute the 2x into this second set of parentheses. 2x times 2x, that's 4x squared. 2x times negative 0.75, no worries. Negative 0.75 times 2. I can't put the x in the calculator, but that's not a problem. Negative 1.5. So this is negative 1.5x. Don't forget the x. And now we distribute the negative 0.75. Negative 0.75 times 2x. I just did that. That's negative 1.5x. And negative 0.75 times itself. Let's do that in the calculator. And I'll just go up and edit this. Negative 0.75, 0.5625. This is not a bad decimal. Write the whole thing. And notice it was positive. So this is plus 0.5625. Again, I can combine the middle two terms together, and we get 4x squared, negative 1.5 minus 1.5. That actually is just negative 3x. And then bring this down, plus 0.5625. If you're not sure on that middle term, put it in a calculator. That's fine. And that's it. This is our answer. And we are finally done with the study guide. If you stuck through this with me the whole time, I really appreciate it. I know this is a long video. Trust me, I get it. I filmed it. But watching it, I know, will definitely help you through the problems and just make you an overall better student. If you have questions over this, please, please, please reach out to me via email or come see me in person before you take your test. Otherwise, I hope you have an awesome day. Bye.